Eleanor's face was a perfect portrait of disbelief. Her mouth, usually set in a tight line of disapproval, hung slightly open. Her carefully powdered skin seemed to crack under the strain of a new, unfamiliar emotion. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated, cornered animal fear. The large monitor on the conference room wall was playing back her grand performance from 2 weeks prior. There she was, my mother-in-law, in what she thought was the privacy of my bedroom. She was a whirlwind of vindictive energy, her movements sharp and vicious. She yanked my clothes from their hangers, cashmere sweaters and silk blouses I had saved for months to buy. She clawed my grandmother's lace wedding dress from its preservation box, her red-painted nails snagging on the delicate fabric, and she stuffed it all, every last piece of my identity, into thick black trash bags. My husband, her son, Liam, stood in the doorway watching, a silent, smiling accomplice. In the sterile quiet of the lawyer's office, the only sound was the rustle of fabric and Eleanor's grunts of exertion on the video. Her on-screen self tied the last bag with a flourish of finality. Liam's recorded voice, slick with condescension, drifted through the speakers. "Is that everything?" "Everything that matters to her," the video version of Eleanor replied, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. In the present, the real Eleanor stared at the screen, then at me. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, were wide with panic. Liam, sitting beside her, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His face went white as a ghost, and for the first time in the 10 years I had known them, for the first time since they had begun their slow, methodical campaign to erase me, I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the sheer, delicious poetry of that moment, you have to understand the years that led up to it. You have to understand the girl I was. I'm sitting here now in a house they never stepped foot in. The afternoon sun is streaming through a large bay window, warming the wood of the floor I chose, the color I painted the walls, the spines of the books I love. It's quiet. It's peaceful. My life is my own now, and the silence is a balm, not a threat. A letter arrived this morning. It's from my lawyer, a final closing statement on a long closed chapter. Seeing the firm's letterhead was what brought it all rushing back. The beginning. I met Liam in college. He was everything I thought I wanted. He was charming, ambitious, from a family that seemed to have it all figured out. His father was a respected surgeon, and his mother, Eleanor, was a pillar of the local charity circuit. They had a large, imposing house that always smelled faintly of lemon polish and old money. I, on the other hand, was raised by my grandmother in a small, cozy house filled with the scent of baking bread and the clutter of a life well lived. My parents had passed away when I was young, and she was my entire world. She taught me to be kind, to be resilient, and most importantly, to be self-sufficient. "Keep your own soil, little bird," she used to say, patting the pocket where she kept her own bank book. "So you always have a place to land." I didn't understand it then. I was in love. And love, I thought, meant merging everything. Liam's parents were polite to me at first. It was a brittle, surface-level politeness that never quite reached their eyes. Eleanor, especially, watched me with a sort of detached curiosity, like a scientist examining a microbe. She would ask questions that sounded innocent but were laced with poison. "So, your grandmother raised you, all on her own? How resourceful. And what was it your father did again? Oh, a trade. How lovely and practical." Each word was a tiny pinprick, designed to remind me of my place. I was not one of them. I tried so hard to fit in. I read the books she mentioned. I learned about the charities she supported. I memorized the names of her friends. I dressed in the conservative, bland styles she seemed to approve of. When Liam and I got married, I folded myself into his life completely. He was starting his own financial consulting firm, and it was all consuming. I had a degree in graphic design and a promising start at a small agency, but I put it aside. "It's just for a few years," Liam promised. kissing my forehead. "Until the business is stable. Then you can do whatever you want." So I became the perfect corporate wife. I hosted dinners for his clients. I managed our home, which they had generously given us the down payment for, a fact Eleanor never let me forget. I managed our social calendar. I was his support system, his cheerleader, his unpaid assistant, and I was good at it. But it was never good enough for Eleanor. If I redecorated a room, she would walk in, run a finger over a new table, and say, "An interesting choice. Very bold." If I cooked a meal, she would pick at it, pushing food around her plate. "I'm just not used to so much seasoning." She chipped away at my confidence piece by piece, day by day. Liam saw it, of course, but he would always smooth it over. "That's just how she is, honey. She means well. She's from a different generation. Don't take it so personally. She just wants the best for us." And I, wanting to keep the peace, wanting to believe the best of the man I loved, I accepted it. I made excuses for her. I told myself I was being too sensitive. For 10 years, I played this game. I smiled through passive-aggressive holidays. I nodded through lectures on everything from flower arranging to how I should be investing Liam's money. I shrank myself to fit into the tiny, wife-shaped box they had built for me. The first real crack in the facade appeared when Liam's business started to struggle. He'd made a series of risky investments that hadn't paid off. Suddenly, the easy flow of money that had defined our lives began to dry up. The tension in our house became a living thing. Liam was short-tempered and distant. Eleanor started calling more frequently, her voice tight with anxiety. One evening, Liam came home, his face ashen. He'd lost his biggest client. The firm was on the verge of collapse. "It's okay," I said immediately, my mind already shifting into problem-solving mode. "We'll figure it out. I can go back to work. I'll update my portfolio, start reaching out to contacts. We can tighten our belts for a while." I expected relief. Instead, he and Eleanor, who was over for one of her support visits, exchanged a look. It was a look I had never seen before, cold and calculating. "That won't be necessary," Eleanor said, her voice smooth as glass. "Your little design hobby won't touch the sides of this problem." "It's not a hobby," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's a career. I was good at it." "Was," she sniffed. 10 years is a lifetime in that industry, dear. No one will hire you." "There's another way," Liam said, avoiding my eyes. "A faster way to get some liquidity." I waited. "Your grandmother's jewelry," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "The pieces she left you, the diamond necklace, the earrings. They must be worth a fortune." I stared at him. I felt a chill spread through my chest, cold and sharp. It wasn't just jewelry. It was her. It was the necklace she wore to my parents' wedding, the earrings she wore on her 50th anniversary. They were memories. They were all I had left of her. "No," I said. The word was small, but it felt immense in the silent room. "What do you mean, no?" Liam's voice rose. "This is our future we're talking about." "She means no," Eleanor cut in, her voice dripping with contempt. "She'd rather see you fail than part with a few old trinkets. How selfish." "They are not trinkets," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "And my grandmother made me promise I would never sell them." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Eleanor scoffed. "What that old woman wanted is irrelevant. We are talking about reality." That was the first time I didn't back down. I stood my ground. The jewelry was not for sale. The argument that followed was ugly. They accused me of not being supportive, of being selfish, of not caring about the family. I finally retreated to our bedroom, my heart pounding. I realized then that they didn't see me as a partner. They saw me as a resource, another asset to be liquidated. Things got worse after that. A week later, I came home from a grocery run to a house that was eerily quiet. Liam's car was in the driveway, and so was Eleanor's. I walked inside, calling his name. No answer. I went upstairs to our bedroom, and I stopped dead in the doorway. The closet door was wide open. My side was empty. Completely, utterly bare. My dresses, my suits, my casual clothes, everything. Gone. My jewelry box was open on the dresser, the velvet lining torn. The non-valuable pieces, the costume jewelry and silver trinkets were scattered, but the valuable items, the few pieces I had from my mother, were gone. My gaze drifted to the corner of the room. 3 large black trash bags were tied neatly by the door. I walked towards them on numb legs. I didn't need to open them. I could see the sleeve of my favorite blue coat sticking out of a gap in one of the bags. I could smell my perfume, the one Liam had bought me for our first anniversary, mingling with the plastic scent of the bag. They had thrown my life in the trash. I heard a noise from downstairs, the clink of glasses. Soft laughter. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. It was Liam and Eleanor in the kitchen. "So much better," Eleanor was saying. "A clean slate. We can finally get rid of all this clutter and get the house ready to sell." "She's going to be upset," Liam said, but there was no concern in his voice, only a weary sort of annoyance. "She'll get over it," Eleanor replied dismissively. "What choice does she have? She has nothing. No job, no money of her own. She needs you, Liam. It's high time she remembered that." A clean slate. Clutter. That's what I was to them. Something to be disposed of. Something primal rose up in me then. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was a cold, terrifying clarity. The kind of clarity you get just before a lightning strike. I backed away from the stairs, silent as a ghost. I went back into the bedroom and looked at the empty closet, the trash bags, the violated jewelry box. Most women would have run downstairs screaming. Most women would have dissolved into tears. But as I stood there, all I could think of was my grandmother's voice. "The best revenge, little bird, is not a loud squawk. It's learning to fly so high they can't touch you." And in that moment, I made a strategic decision. I would not confront them. I would not give them the satisfaction of a fight. I would give them exactly what they wanted, a broken, defeated woman, while I quietly, secretly built a cage for them. What they didn't know was that my grandmother had been much more than a baker of bread. She had been a shrewd investor. She had lived modestly, but she had been quietly brilliant with the small inheritance my grandfather had left her. And she had left it all to me. Not in a simple bank account, but in a carefully constructed trust. A trust with a very specific clause. It was to be managed by her lawyer until I either turned 40 or I was divorced. She had seen something in Liam that I, in my youthful blindness, had missed. She had seen his weakness, his greed, and she had protected me from it. I had never told Liam about the trust. It was my secret, my soil, and there was another secret they didn't know. About a year ago, there had been a couple of break-ins in our neighborhood. I had suggested a security system. Liam had scoffed at the expense, so I had done it myself. I bought a set of small, high-definition cameras, the kind that look like smoke detectors or air fresheners. I installed them myself, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the upstairs hallway, and one in our bedroom tucked away on a bookshelf. I had told myself it was for security, but a small, dark part of me knew even then that the biggest threat to my safety might not be outside the house. It might be living right inside it. I walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. I arranged my face into a mask of pure devastation. I let my shoulders slump. I made my eyes well up with tears. When they saw me, they fell silent. My clothes," I whispered, my voice trembling. "They're gone." Eleanor put on a magnificent performance of sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear," she said, rushing to my side. "Liam, tell her." Liam cleared his throat. "Honey, we had a small moth problem. We had to get rid of some things. It was for the best. We can buy you new things. Better things." A moth problem. The lie was so audacious, so insulting, it almost made me laugh. But I didn't. I cried. I let a single perfect tear roll down my cheek. "Everything?" I sobbed. Even my grandmother's dress? Eleanor patted my arm. It was practically disintegrating, dear. It was an act of mercy. I looked from her fake, pitying face to her son's guilty, averted eyes, and I let them believe they had won. That night, after they were asleep, I slipped out of bed. I went to my office, locked the door, and opened my laptop. I accessed the camera footage, and I watched it all. I watched Eleanor's sneering face as she tore through my belongings. I watched her hold up my favorite dress, wrinkle her nose in disgust, and toss it into a bag. I watched Liam lean against the doorframe, sipping a beer, as his mother erased his wife. I downloaded the file. I saved it to a thumb drive. I saved it to a secure cloud server. I saved it to another thumb drive, which I mailed to my personal post office box the next morning. Then I called the number my grandmother had given me years ago, the number for Mr. Miller, her lawyer. I knew this day would come, he said, his voice kind but weary. Your grandmother was a very wise woman. The preparation began. It was a campaign fought in whispers and spreadsheets. By day, I was the picture of a subdued, grieving wife. I shuffled around the house in the cheap sweatpants Liam had bought me to replace my wardrobe. I cried at odd moments. I apologized for being so emotional about the moth problem. I played the part so well they relaxed completely. They thought they had broken me. But by night, I was a general, planning a war. Mr. Miller and I spoke every evening. He activated the trust. Money, my money, began to flow into new accounts that Liam knew nothing about. I started documenting everything, every condescending comment from Eleanor, every financial demand from Liam. They became careless, emboldened by my seeming weakness. They would sit at the kitchen table, right under a camera, and discuss their plans. We'll list the house next month, Eleanor said one morning over coffee. I've already spoken to a realtor. We can get at least $1 million for it. That should be enough to start Liam's new venture. What about her? Liam asked. She can get a small apartment, Eleanor said with a wave of her hand. She doesn't need much. We'll give her a small settlement from the sale, just enough to be seen as generous. They were planning to sell my home, the home bought with a down payment from my trust fund, a fact I had legally documented with Mr. Miller. They were planning to give me a small settlement from my own money. I sat at the table with them, sipping my tea, and nodded meekly. Whatever you think is best, Liam, I murmured. Inside, a core of ice was forming around my heart. The weeks that followed were a master class in endurance. Their arrogance grew with each passing day. Liam, who had no job and no prospects, began acting like a tycoon again. He bought a new, expensive watch with one of our joint credit cards, a card I was secretly paying the balance on from my own funds. Got to look the part for these meetings, he'd said, flashing it at me. Big things are happening. He was meeting with no one. His new venture was a fiction he and his mother had concocted, a story to keep up appearances with their friends. Eleanor began treating me like a servant. She would call me and demand I come over to her house to help her with some menial task. The silver needs polishing, and my girl is on vacation. You're not doing anything, are you, dear? I would go. I would polish her silver, my hands aching, and listen to her talk about the wonderful new woman her friend's son had married. She's a lawyer, Eleanor would say pointedly. So accomplished. She'll be a real asset to that family. Every word was a twisting knife. But I just smiled my sad little smile and kept polishing. I was gathering ammunition. The cameras caught it all. It caught Liam on the phone, lying to his father about his job prospects. It caught Eleanor rifling through my desk, looking for financial documents. It caught them mocking my grief over my ruined clothes. She's still moping about those old rags, Eleanor cackled one afternoon. You'd think she lost a child. Liam laughed, a short, ugly sound. Each laugh, each lie, each moment of cruelty was another file saved, another nail for their coffins. Mr. Miller was meticulous. He had me gather every financial statement from the last 10 years. We traced every penny. We proved that the down payment for the house had come directly from a trust account disbursement. We proved that I had paid for the majority of the renovations and upkeep from that same source. We proved that Liam's contributions had been minimal and that in recent years he had actually been draining our joint accounts for his failing business. It was all there, in black and white. He had been committing financial fraud against me for years. The hardest part was the waiting. There were days I wanted to scream, days I wanted to take the thumb drive and tape it to their foreheads. But I held on to my grandmother's advice. Not a loud squawk. Fly high. The breaking point for them came about 2 months after the clothes incident. They had a realtor come to the house. They didn't tell me she was coming. I was in the garden wearing an old pair of jeans and one of Liam's cast-off t-shirts, my hands covered in dirt. Eleanor arrived with a brisk, professional-looking woman. "Oh, there you are," Eleanor said, her voice full of false brightness. "This is Brenda. She's just going to have a look around." Brenda the realtor gave me a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was assessing me. The dowdy wife digging in the dirt, an obstacle to be managed. They walked through my house, my home, discussing its potential. "We can knock down this wall," Brenda said in the living room. "Open up the space." "And the kitchen is terribly dated," Eleanor added. "It needs a complete overhaul." I had designed that kitchen. I had chosen every tile, every cabinet. I stood in the doorway, silent, covered in dirt, and I listened to them tear my life apart. That was the moment I knew it was time. I called Mr. Miller that evening. "They're trying to sell the house," I said. "Then we're ready," he replied, his voice calm and steady. "I'll file the divorce papers tomorrow morning, and I'll schedule a 4-way meeting in my office. We'll present them with our terms." The confrontation was set for a Friday. Liam was thrilled when I told him my lawyer wanted to meet. "Excellent," he said, beaming. "She's finally seeing reason. This will be a quick and easy settlement." He and his mother spent the next 2 days planning their victory lap. They talked about the condo Liam would buy in the city. They talked about the European cruise Eleanor wanted to take. They were utterly, blissfully, and fatally confident. On the morning of the meeting, I took my time getting ready. I didn't have many clothes left, but I had planned for this. A week before, I had used my own money to buy a single, perfect outfit. A dark gray sheath dress, elegant and severe, a pair of classic black pumps. I did my hair and makeup with care. When I walked downstairs, Liam and Eleanor were waiting by the door, impatient. They both stopped and stared at me. I could see the confusion in their eyes. This was not the broken, frumpy woman they had grown used to. "What are you wearing?" Eleanor asked, her nose wrinkling. "My armor," I said softly. They didn't understand. They just hurried me into the car, annoyed that I was delaying their triumph. The lawyer's office was on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper. It was all glass and steel and quiet, expensive competence. Mr. Miller greeted us at the door. He was an older man with kind eyes and a spine made of iron. He led us to a large conference room with a polished table and a huge monitor on one wall. We sat down, me and Mr. Miller on one side, Liam and Eleanor and their lawyer on the other. Their lawyer was a slick, young man who looked like he'd stepped out of a television show. He had the same arrogant smirk as Liam. They started first. Their lawyer laid out their terms. They wanted the house, of course. They wanted the majority of the assets. They were offering me a pittance of a settlement in recognition of my years as a homemaker. They claimed Liam's business had failed due to the emotional distress my unreasonable behavior had caused him. They painted me as unstable, emotional, and selfish for refusing to sell my trinkets. I sat there and listened to them rewrite our entire history. I didn't say a word. I just watched them. When their lawyer was finished, he sat back, looking pleased with himself. "So," he said, turning to Mr. Miller, "a very generous offer. I think you'll agree." Mr. Miller didn't even look at him. He looked at me. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you for your presentation," Mr. Miller said, his voice calm. "Now, we have one of our own." He picked up a remote from the table, and he pressed a button. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. And that's where we came in. The first image on the screen was a crystal-clear shot of my bedroom. Liam and Eleanor both leaned forward, confused. Their lawyer frowned. "What is this?" And then she walked into the frame. The on-screen Eleanor, her face a mask of fury, marching towards my closet. The real Eleanor gasped. We all sat in silence and watched the entire sordid affair play out in high definition. The yanking of clothes, the destruction of my grandmother's dress, the stuffing of the trash bags. The sound quality was perfect. Every cruel word, every dismissive laugh echoed in the silent room. When the video ended, Eleanor was staring at the screen, her face drained of all color. Liam was sputtering. This is illegal. You can't film people in their own home." "Actually, you can," Mr. Miller said calmly. "In this state, as long as one party consents, and as the owner of the cameras, my client consented. It's perfectly admissible." Their lawyer was no longer smirking. He was looking at his clients with a dawning horror. "But that's not all," Mr. Miller continued, clicking another button on the remote. A new video started, a compilation. A greatest hits of their cruelty. There they were at the kitchen table plotting to sell my house. "She can get a small apartment. She doesn't need much." There was Eleanor on the phone with one of her friends. "No, she has no idea. She thinks he's a genius. Honestly, the woman is a fool." There was Liam, laughing about my moth-eaten rags. Clip after clip, lie after lie, insult after insult. By the end of it, Eleanor was shaking like a leaf in a storm. Liam looked like he was going to be sick. Their lawyer was frantically shuffling through his papers, his face pale. He knew the game was over. Mr. Miller turned off the monitor. The silence in the room was deafening. Then he slid a thick folder across the table. "Here are our terms," he said. "My client is filing for divorce on the grounds of extreme emotional cruelty and financial fraud." He let that sink in. "We have bank records proving that the down payment for the house and the majority of its mortgage payments and upkeep came from my client's personal trust fund. The house is therefore not a marital asset. It is her sole and separate property. She will be keeping it." Liam made a choking sound. "Furthermore," Mr. Miller continued, his voice relentless, "we have documented years of financial malfeasance on Mr. Hampton's part. He has been systematically draining marital assets to fund a lifestyle he could not afford, and to cover the losses of a business he ran into the ground through incompetence. My client will not only be keeping her own assets, but we will also be suing for the return of all marital funds he misappropriated." He paused, then looked directly at Eleanor. "As for you, madam, my client will be filing a civil suit for the destruction of personal property. We have an itemized and appraised list. The total value, including the antique lace dress, which is irreplaceable, is well into the 6 figures. We will also be filing a police report for the theft of several items of jewelry from her dresser." Eleanor looked like she might faint. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice a reedy thread. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. "You threw my life in the trash," I said, looking right at her. "You thought I was clutter. Now you're going to pay to replace every last thread." Their lawyer tried to bluster. "This is an outrage. We will fight this." "Fight it with what?" Mr. Miller asked, gesturing to the dark screen. "Your clients have confessed. On camera. Their greed, their contempt, their criminal actions. There is no jury in the world that wouldn't side with my client. So here is the choice. You can accept our terms now, or we can proceed to a very public, very messy, and for you, a very, very expensive trial. The local news would love this story, don't you think? The prominent socialite and her son caught on camera. The threat hung in the air, thick and heavy. Eleanor's reputation was everything to her. The thought of public humiliation was more terrifying to her than any financial penalty. I watched the fight go out of her. I watched her proud, rigid posture collapse. She looked old and small. Liam looked at his mother, then at me. There were tears in his eyes. "Honey," he started, his voice thick with fake emotion. "I'm so sorry. I let her. She manipulated me. We can fix this, please." It was his last pathetic attempt to play me. I just looked at him with dead eyes. "No, Liam," I said, "we can't." Their lawyer, seeing the game was up, snatched the folder and started reading. The collapse was swift and total. They signed everything. They had no choice. The divorce was finalized in record time. Liam walked away with nothing but his personal effects and a mountain of debt. He had to declare bankruptcy within 6 months. The lawsuit against Eleanor proceeded. To avoid the public trial and the police report being pursued, she settled. She had to sell her own large, imposing house, the one that smelled of lemon polish, to pay the judgment. She and Liam ended up moving into a small, rented townhouse on the other side of the city. The social fallout was just as devastating. Somehow, a few select clips from the video footage found their way into the inboxes of Eleanor's most prominent friends on the charity circuit. No one ever knew for sure who sent them. Mr. Miller had a very discreet nephew who was good with computers. Eleanor was quietly asked to step down from her board positions. Her phone stopped ringing. Her friends would cross the street to avoid her. Her greatest fear, public shame and irrelevance, had come true. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she spent most of her days inside the cramped townhouse, the blinds drawn, refusing to see anyone. Liam tried to find work, but the story of his financial mismanagement and spectacular divorce followed him. No one would touch him. He ended up taking a low-level job in a call center, a bitter, angry man who had lost everything because he had fatally underestimated the woman he married. About a year after it was all over, he showed up at my door. I had already changed the locks, of course. I had gutted the house, tearing out every last trace of their taste, of their presence. I had rebuilt it into my own sanctuary. I saw him through the peephole. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His expensive suit was rumpled, and his eyes were hollow. I opened the door, but I blocked the entrance with my body. "What do you want, Liam?" He tried to smile, that old, charming smile that used to work on me. It just looked sad now. "I miss you," he said. "I made a terrible mistake. My mother, she poisoned my mind. I see that now. I love you. I've always loved you." He was holding a cheap bouquet of gas station flowers. I looked at the flowers, then at his face. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. "You don't love me, Liam," I said, my voice even. "You love what I could do for you. You miss the comfort. You miss the money. You don't miss me." "That's not true," he insisted, his voice cracking. "I can change. We can start over." I thought about all the years I had spent trying to please him, all the pieces of myself I had sanded down to make him happy, all the quiet humiliations I had endured. I thought about my grandmother's lace dress in a black trash bag. "The person you were married to is gone, Liam," I told him. "Your mother threw her away. You should thank her. She did me a favor." I saw the last flicker of hope die in his eyes. He finally understood. There was no going back. I closed the door gently in his face. I leaned against it for a moment, listening to his footsteps retreat down the path. And then I went back to my life. Which brings me back to now, sitting in my sun-drenched living room. The lawyer's letter is on the table beside me. It's just a final tax document, a piece of administrative cleanup, a postscript to a finished story. The front door opens and a man walks in. His name is Mark. He was the contractor who helped me renovate the house. He's kind and quiet, with laugh lines around his eyes and hands that know how to build things, not just break them. He saw the mess of the house I had been left with, and he saw the vision I had for it. He listened. He never once told me my ideas were bold or interesting. He just said, "I can do that for you." He's holding 2 mugs of tea. He places one on the table in front of me. "You were 1,000 miles away," he says, his voice warm. I smile, a real smile this time. "Just thinking about old ghosts," I say. "Good ghosts or bad ghosts?" he asks, sitting down across from me. "They're not ghosts anymore," I reply, picking up the warm mug. "They're just a story, and it's over." He doesn't press. He doesn't need to know all the details. He just knows the woman I am now. I took the money from Eleanor's settlement, and I started my own business, a graphic design agency, the hobby my mother-in-law had sneered at. It's successful, more successful than Liam's firm ever was. I work with people I respect, on projects I love. I built a new life from the ashes of the old one. I look around my beautiful, peaceful home, my home. I think of my grandmother. I finally understand what she meant. Keep your own soil, little bird. It wasn't just about money. It was about keeping a piece of yourself that no one could touch, a core of strength, a sense of your own worth that couldn't be thrown away in a trash bag. Liam and Eleanor tried to take everything from me. They thought if they took my clothes, my home, my security, that I would be nothing. But they were wrong. They couldn't take my intelligence. They couldn't take my resilience. They couldn't take the strength my grandmother had instilled in me. They only succeeded in showing me who they truly were. And in doing so, they showed me who I could be without them. Free. Mark reaches across the table and takes my hand. His touch is gentle and sure. "Welcome back," he says. I squeeze his hand. It's good to be back. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the floor. The past is finally where it belongs. In the past and the future, my future is bright and clear and all my own.